The thing he found was a book. Not a dangerous book by any measure the outside world would recognize, not something violent or shameful or secret in the way that word usually means. It was a library book, a worn paperback with a cracked spine and someone else's pencil marks in the margins, about a woman who had traveled alone across 3 countries and written about what she had seen. I had borrowed it from the Englishwoman who ran the dry goods counter 2 towns over, tucked it inside my sewing basket under a layer of fabric, and read 4 pages at a time in the early mornings before the house woke up, my back to the door, the lamp turned low. I had been doing this for 3 months. He found it in an hour. Not because he was looking for it, because in an Amish house there is no such thing as a space that belongs only to you, and everyone understands this so completely that hiding something requires a level of concealment I had clearly not achieved. He set it on the kitchen table between us, the same way, I realized, that he had set the receipt for fabric there the year before. That particular gesture, the careful placement, the thing laid down like evidence, was his way of opening a conversation he had already decided the shape of. I looked at the book, and I looked at him, and I thought about the woman in the pages who had crossed 3 countries alone, and I thought about the 4 pages I had managed to read, and I thought that I did not yet know if she had made it to the 3rd country, and now I was not going to find out. My name is Miriam, and this is Miriam the Amish, the channel where I finally say the things my community would never allow me to say out loud. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I left a few years ago. If you want to hear the truth about Amish life from someone who actually lived it, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. There is still so much I have not told you. Now let me explain something about privacy inside an Old Order Amish home, because the concept works so differently from what people outside the community understand that it requires some careful unpacking before the rest of this story makes sense. In the English world, privacy is considered something close to a right. You have spaces that are yours: a room, a drawer, a phone, a journal, a corner of your mind that you are not required to make available to anyone else. The expectation of some private territory is so fundamental to how English people understand personhood that they rarely think about it consciously. It is simply there, the way oxygen is simply there, unremarkable until it is removed. In an Old Order Amish household, privacy is understood differently, not as a right, but as a potential problem. The community's theology is built on the idea that concealment breeds pride, and pride breeds separation from God and from the community. Gelassenheit, the yielding of the self, means not holding anything back, not from God, not from your husband, not from the community that is the living body of your faith. A person who needs private space is a person who is protecting something, and a person who is protecting something is a person who has not fully surrendered. That is the theology. In practice, what it produces is a household where a wife has no drawer she can call entirely her own, no corner of a room that is not, in principle, accessible to her husband, no thought she is expected to keep from him if he asks for it. Not because he is cruel, because transparency is holiness, because concealment is the first sign of a self that has not been fully given over. I had understood this my entire life. I had grown up in it. My mother kept nothing from my father, not because she had nothing to keep, but because the idea of keeping had been so thoroughly removed from her understanding of what a wife was that I genuinely believe she never experienced the absence of it as a loss. She had been shaped to its exact contours, the way water is shaped to a vessel. The vessel was all she had ever known. I was shaped differently, and I did not know it for a long time. The first book I hid was when I was 14. A library book that a girl from an English family had left behind at the farm stand, a story about 2 sisters who ran away from their home and built a life in a city. I read it in 2 days, hidden inside a feed sack in the barn, and then I put it in the English girl's mailbox, because keeping it felt dangerous in a way I could not name, but could feel very clearly. That feeling, the warmth of the pages and the danger underneath, was the first time I understood that there was a version of myself that wanted things the household did not have room for. By the time I was married and keeping that worn paperback inside a sewing basket, I had hidden maybe a dozen books over the years, never for long, always with that same doubled feeling, the pleasure of the pages and the low, constant awareness of what finding them would mean. I had become skilled at the particular alertness a hidden thing requires, the way you start to track the movements of the house around you, who is where, how long before someone might come into the room, whether the lamp is bright enough to be seen under the door. That alertness is exhausting in a way that is hard to describe to someone who has never practiced it. It is not fear exactly. It is more like a second layer of consciousness running underneath the first, always monitoring, always calculating, never fully at rest. I did not understand until years later that this was what it felt like to have an interior life inside a structure that had no room for one. I want to pause here because I think what I am describing is going to be familiar to some of you in ways that have nothing to do with Amish life, and I want you to stay with me. Please subscribe to Miriam the Amish, like this video, and turn on the notification bell, because what happened after he found the book is something that shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the life I was living, and I think it is one of the most important things I have yet to say on this channel. He did not raise his voice when he found it. I want to keep saying this, not because I think it makes what happened smaller, but because I think it is important for you to understand that the most effective forms of control rarely announce themselves as control. He asked me where I had gotten it. I told him. He asked me how long I had had it. I told him. He asked me why I had not mentioned it to him, and I sat with that question for a moment, because the honest answer was one I could not give inside that kitchen, in that life. The honest answer was that I had not mentioned it because I had known he would not approve, and I had wanted to read it anyway, and there had been no path between those two true things that did not require me to hide one of them. What I said instead was that I had not thought it was important enough to mention. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said that in our household, nothing was too small to mention. That a wife who kept things from her husband, even small things, even a borrowed book, was practicing a habit of concealment that could grow into something larger. He said it without anger. He said it the way you say something you genuinely believe, and I think he did genuinely believe it. I think he had been taught so completely that a wife's transparency was a form of faithfulness that he could not see the difference between concealment and privacy, between hiding and simply having a corner of your mind that was yours. He returned the book himself. He drove to the dry goods store and he handed it back to the woman at the counter, and I do not know what he said to her, but she never offered me another one. After that, I stopped for a while. Not because I had stopped wanting to read, because the particular cost of discovery had made the pleasure too expensive, and I needed to recalculate what I could afford. This is what happens inside a controlled environment when something you need is removed. You do not stop needing it. You go underground with it. You become more careful. You find new hiding places, literal and otherwise. 3 months later, I began reading at the public library in the town where I did our occasional errands. I would leave 20 minutes earlier than necessary and sit in the back corner with whatever was on the shelf near the door and read as many pages as the time allowed. I never checked anything out. I never brought anything home. The library became a room I lived in for stolen minutes at a time, a place where I existed as a person who read, separate from the person who came home to a kitchen and a husband and a household that had no room for someone who wanted to know what happened when two sisters ran away to a city, or a woman crossed 3 countries alone. An Englishwoman I eventually came to know, one of the volunteers at the organization that helped people leaving plain communities, said something to me in our first conversation that I have never forgotten. She said, "The things we hide are not always things we are ashamed of. Sometimes they are the truest things about us, the parts we protect not because they are wrong, but because the world we are living in has made them dangerous." She said, "Pay attention to what you hide. It will tell you who you actually are when no one is deciding for you." I thought about the books, the feed sack in the barn when I was 14, the sewing basket when I was 22, the back corner of a public library between errands, a woman crossing 3 countries alone, 4 pages at a time. In therapy, I learned what my therapist called autonomous interiority, the concept that a person has a right not just to private space, but to a private self, a dimension of their inner life that is not subject to their partner's or their community's access or approval. She told me that a relationship which requires the complete surrender of interior privacy is not a relationship between 2 people. It is a relationship between a person and their own erasure. She said the need for some private self is not pride. It is the most basic requirement of personhood. Without it, you do not have a marriage. You have an absorption. I finished reading that book after I left. I found a copy in a donation box outside a church 3 weeks after I arrived in the English world. The same edition, the same cracked spine. I read it in 2 days. The woman in the pages made it to the 3rd country. She sat in a cafe she had never been to before, in a city she had come to alone, and she ordered something off a menu she could barely read, and she said in the last line of that chapter, "I did not know until I sat down here that I had been hungry for this my entire life." I read that line 4 times. Then I put the book down and I sat with it for a while. If you have ever hidden something, not because it was shameful, but because it was yours, and the life you were living had no room for things that were only yours, I see you. If you have ever read 4 pages at a time with your back to the door and the lamp turned low, I see you. If you have ever been told that needing a corner of your own mind was a failure of faithfulness, you were not failing. You were surviving. You were keeping alive the part of yourself that the structure around you did not have room for. And that part of you, the one that hid the book, the one that got up early to read 4 pages before the house woke, that part was not your sin. That was yourself, and it was worth every hiding place you found for it. If this story reached something in you, please subscribe to Miriam the Amish, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. There is still so much I have not said. Until next time, choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.